Раз, раз. All right. All right. Hello. Hello, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the show, right? Right. Okay. And I was asked to do this presentation in English. I think like 80% of people in this hall, if you really want, you can just ask me later, and I'll do the same presentation for you in Russian back in our office, okay? Good. Let's go. So a few words about myself. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Danny, and I'm the development director of World of Warships, developed by Wargaming St. Petersburg. I work in game development for about 10 years now, and before Warships, I worked on relatively small titles in Lasta Studio. This is my first and last place of work so far. And hopefully this will not change and nobody would fire me after this presentation. I've worked in small teams and I've done downloadable titles for different platforms, for consoles, for PlayStation Network, XBLA, Wii, PC. And my major disciplines were always management and game design. But since I worked so much in a small teams environment, I had a chance to try myself in many, many different perspectives. I've done animation, particle effects, a little bit of scripting, lots of QA, localization, and like all this remaining kind of stuff everybody does while working on a small team. And what's World of Warships? World of Warships, that's the latest wargaming large-scale MMO. We've launched around a year ago already. We've been live for 1 year. We're operating in 6 different clusters across the world. That's CIS, Europe, North America, Korea, Southeast Asia, and China. Our development team consists of around 200 people. And just like with other wargaming titles, we've got 16 offices around the world. Sun never sets upon wargaming, right? Who contribute to the success. And I believe we count everybody involved into operating the game, we would have around 400 people. And what this talk will be about. I will mostly talk about how we grew, about the team growth, how we grew over the initial years of development, what problems we have encountered, how we fixed them, and how we didn't die. I started this talk on purpose that I'm coming from the small teams myself, and I believe one of the biggest successes that we achieved over those years is that we managed to keep this feeling of a very tightly knit and small development team while still working on such a huge behemoth. A few words about how it all started. At some point, when Wargaming released World of Tanks, and it still is, a huge success, they started to look for someone who could help them to develop the franchise further, because it was clear that the community wanted to expand into other elements. They wanted air, they wanted sea, and that's when they came to us. And we had very good reputation on the market. We've been, Lasta and Wargaming, been developing very similar games like 10 years ago and been competing with each other for quite some time. So they came to us as we had the required experience both in online title development and development of history-based wargames. The negotiation process went really fast. We've done a very quick prototype that showed that we have skilled engineers and skilled designers. We showed how we wanted to approach the game. Yeah, and the entire team was super excited and super motivated to work on something really big and really meaningful, like World of Tanks, right? And we all loved World of Tanks. So the paperwork was done very quickly, and so the work began. By that time, we had a relatively small team. The studio size was about 50 people, and initial Warship's team was something like 35 people. The structure was very simple. Engineers, artists, game designers, QA, a pretty regular setup for a small team, right? And it was good. It was good. That was all we needed to deliver projects in the past, and it worked wonderfully. Of course, we couldn't really accomplish large scope, but if you manage scope correctly, it was easy, right? Planning was easy, delivery was easy. Well, you know, when I say easy, I mean game development kind of easy, which is hard as hell. But we kept up. Though the scope of Warships was extremely large. And since day one, we knew that we will need to grow and bring more people on board. And we were excited. We were so excited. Back in the days of smaller projects, every new hire and like every new person in the team was such a big event because it opened up, every new person opened up enormous opportunities. It's like you can do more things, like more features, refactor some old code that slows everybody down, improve tools. So we were like, yes, awesome. We'll have way more people, and we could make the best project ever, and it's going to be so much easier compared to the old days. And we will never be short on work hands anymore. Hooray. So we started to grow. And as there were so many specific things that needed to be addressed, we started to implement a lot of specialization. Engineers got split into technology and game engineers with different specialized teams inside. Our department started to consist of different teams as well as designers. And at the beginning, people were very happy that they don't need to work on some random things anymore, right? What's so funny? Huh? Okay. And everybody could concentrate on what they can do best. Programmers write specific code of their preferred domain, concentrating on rendering or on tools or on game logic. Game designers don't need to help with QAing the game anymore and could concentrate on writing documents and working on balance sheets. And as we moved further and further, we needed more and more people to cover different things that came up. And with every milestone, we encountered like new roles and areas that we were not familiar with, and the best solution we had was always hire more people. So the team got bigger and bigger, the hierarchy became more and more complex with every day, and we were always overflooded with work and with problems and with issues that needed to be solved, and everybody was completely busy. The only solution, and the most reasonable solution that we had at this time, that we need a new guy to solve this problem. So in short, every day brought more people and more specialization. And at some point in time, we were not as excited as before. The planning became tremendously difficult. Delivery started to suffer, and predictability decreased greatly due to increased complexity. And what do you do with complexity? According to the general rule, managing complexity is a core responsibility of a certain group of people. And who are people in organizations that manage complexity? Managers and team leads. In order to show how big the complexity was, we're going to do an exercise. We're going to map a workflow on an organizational chart. This exercise was very eye-opening for us back in the day and actually helped us to understand where we're having problems and made us think of possible solutions. Before we rush into this exercise, I would like to state a few definitions so it's easier for you to follow. Because this is game development, and it's different everywhere you go, different studios name different things differently everywhere. So for the purpose of this exact exercise, when I say a manager, I mean a person who has several reports, and his reports also have reports. So this is a manager of managers. And when I say team lead, I mean a person who manages people who actually do work, right? Also, for the purpose of this exercise, we're going to examine an exact feature that we worked on. And to make it easier for you to follow, I've decided that we will go with chat. I believe some of you worked on chat features before, and even if you haven't, it's relatively easy to understand what kind of components a chat feature could have. So if we look at this feature from a small team's perspective, it's relatively straightforward, okay? And there's little complexity. Who do you need to make a chat, right? Depending on the system's difficulty and you'll want to have a server engineer to do the backend work. Some in-game work is required from client engineers. You'll need to design the layout, draw some art. Depending on how big your team is, you'll either want to have a QA engineer to verify the result or not. So once again, depending on your team size and the complexity of the chat system, we're thinking about something like 4-6 people total, right? But let's see how it works in a bigger team where people are highly specialized and work in different departments. So let's go. Imagine this chat feature is pulled from the backlog and assigned to the game design department manager to come up with a concept. And I've also created this small widget over here to help us track the people involved in real time. So at this stage, we have 2 people involved, that project manager and game design department manager. So game design department manager assigns work to his reports, responsible for UX design and feature design. They do their part, right? Approve it with their manager. Maybe there are a few iterations going back and forth. And after that, the concept could go to people responsible for execution. So it goes to engineering managers, it goes to art manager, who evaluate the design. Maybe there are a few iterations going back and forth, once again, making sure that the design is clear enough, that there is no ambiguity, and that it is ready for work. So department managers distribute work between their guys, and their team leads distribute it to their guys, taking into account their availability, other tasks in progress, and all this other dependencies, and so on. So eventually, this gets done, and it goes to QA, where more work is being generated in form of bugs for almost all people involved into making that feature. Pew. 19 people. 19 people are involved into making a small feature. But to make this number even more dramatic, let's see how the distribution looks like. If we look at the number of developers, we actually see the amount of people we thought about at the very beginning of the example. But after carefully going through the process, we can clearly see that there is a huge management overhead. Of course, all those managers and team leads, they're not working full-time on these features, right? Right? But they get stuck. They get stuck in coordination because they need to plan all the resources, they need to track dependencies, they need to resolve conflicts, and they actually become a huge bottleneck. If you're coming from a small team, you could wonder, why? why do you need all this? These managers are slowing everything down. They're not effective. They're not efficient. Like, this is like a huge piece of crap. Yes, you're right. You're right. But you're wrong at the same time. Big teams allow you to do something that small teams cannot achieve, right? You can work on many things simultaneously. If you're in a small team and you're working on that chat feature, it will most likely take all your resources to that thing, while a bigger team can work on many things simultaneously. And we need to remember that we're talking about an online title that requires a very stable release cadence, frequent releases, releases rich with features and content, and high-quality releases. In our case, we operate with at least 3 versions at the same time. One version is running on production, and there is always something with it, right? Somebody's PC configuration is not running the game correctly. Bugs are found, balance issues are found, like somebody is not satisfied enough, and you really want to push updates to your light servers as fast as you can because you want to keep your players happy. The second version is in stabilization, where there are tons of last-minute changes, bug fixes, preparations for release, communication with the publishing team, and so on, which also generate tons of action items. And of course, there's also the next big thing, where major development work is done, where prototypes are tested, where features are shaped, design changes, and so on. Then toss in an E3 build that needs to be delivered with something special, or any other build for any other event that will only need to last for 2 hours, and after this, it's done. It's a lot of communication. So remember that last slide that showed how complex the communication was in a single communication information flow how complex it was in a single feature? And now imagine what happens when you have around 30 or 40 features in development at the same time, and you have like 3 and more versions in operation. It's just mind-blowing. Sometimes when you're trying to think of all that work that is being done in that building you're in, and we're not talking about people on the other sides of the planet, it just explodes when you start thinking of it and how difficult it is to coordinate everything. But since the very beginning, we knew that we're going to have like something very complex that we'll need to deal with, right? And in order to deal with this, our strategy was to go with specialization, which is a rather common approach. I know a lot of major studios that are doing work that way, and it looks absolutely viable when you just start thinking of it without knowing all the details. However, though specialization potentially improves productivity of one particular person or one particular department, it slows down large teams as a whole by creating dependencies and complexity. And there was something else. There was something else that troubled us greatly at that point. That specialization also had a very and extremely bad side effect that was worse than complexity. Department silos. What's a department silo? Department silo is when programmers think that artists should work better, and artists think that programmers should work better. Silo is a business term that's been discussed in board meetings around the globe for over the last 30 years. And unlike many other trendy management terms, this one didn't disappear. Departmental silos are seen as a growing pain of organizations of all sizes. Ownership is very difficult here because as a feature owner, you can't really affect the outcomes of all departments due to conflict of interest. In the departmental-based structures, People are evaluated and incentivized by what they do for their team and their department, and not how they contribute to the overall product's productivity or success. And on first hand, this looks also absolutely viable. When you hire an engineer, you hire him because he is a good engineer, right? And if he writes good code, he's a good engineer. And it doesn't matter that, like, project dies, the code was good, right? So at some point in time, it was a very common situation when all departments completed their tasks on features they worked on, but features would not shape up. And there was nothing we could ship to players, and that led to empty releases. Wargaming titles are based on an assumption that the lifetime of players in our games is very, very long. It's months and months and months, and preferably years. And that means that there is a strong need to update the game effectively and efficiently to keep our players engaged and provide high-quality service. At some point, we ended up in a situation where we released several versions in a row with extremely blank patch notes. There was nothing big in it, nothing meaningful, because everything took so long to develop. And this naturally caused players' rage. And you know that you as game developers, there is nothing worse for our team to hear bad things about stuff that we do, right? This is always very, very painful. And that's where blame starts to appear. Teams start to blame each other. We missed that feature because of that department or because of that department. We've done our part and they haven't done their part. Us and them at some point became a very common thing. Well, hopefully this situation happened when we were still in alpha stage, so the community size was not that big back then. But it was a very clear signal that something is very wrong and we will never deliver something good with that approach. So we knew we needed to change. We've experimented with process a lot. And I believe I could give a separate talk on evolution of process in World of Warships, on every single crazy thing that we tried and how we experiment with every possible methodology on our project. But what we found is that no matter how much effort we put into process improvements, we were not seeing like a significant impact from that effort that we were putting in this. And we needed something big, we needed something urgent, something that would give us a quick improvement, the faster the better. We knew that we not only needed a process change, we needed a change in mindset maybe, in how people think about their work, how they communicate with each other. We needed a change in mindset. However, everybody's afraid of change, right? And I was afraid of change, especially when you're trying to change something fundamental, like the way people used to do work. So we started with a pilot. I will simplify this a little bit for the purpose of this example, so it's easier to follow. We took the most spread discipline across the team, the UI, identified everybody who was involved into making UI-related work across the studio, and united them into a single team. With one lead, Jerome the Lowell, co-location, we made sure that they all sat together next to each other, and one plan. They were all unified by one goal and one plan. Unfortunately, just around the time of that transformation, we had to upgrade our chat system. But this time, during the same iteration length, we had to deliver, like, I don't know, 5 to 6 times more work. So let's go through the same thing and see how the new team handled the job. So this time we're skipping the design department, and the task gets straight to the new team's lead. He will be the feature owner. So he and his guys are coming up with a design, and it is very important to remember that this time these green boxes, they're not teams. They're not teams, they're just people. They're just designers and artists. So there is no separate layer of management. This is a cross-functional team. But for this feature, for that chat feature, remember we talked that we need a server engineer. They're lacking a core function as they don't have a server engineer full-time on their team. Now, instead of adding additional communications like we've seen in the previous example, what happens is that the feature owner talks to the engineering manager. They talk to the server lead guy, and ta-da, we got a guest star. Where is my guest star? Here he is. Hello. So basically, for the duration of that feature, we're physically relocating one person to a different group with his brain and his body and everything. Very, very important thing is that that new team accumulated people from 4 different departments. Before that, they would most likely do their parts of work one by one, right? Now, since they're all in the same room, they could do the majority of work simultaneously, thus completing it way faster, removing the hands-off issues, and reducing the amount of mistakes made due to communication failures. And remember how bad things were after the QA submission. Now, since there is a dedicated QA in the same room who is aware of, where's the dedicated QA? Here you go. You see, they're sitting close to each other. They're friends now. So he's been with the team for the entire development time, and he knows about the technology that they're using. He's been attending their stand-up meetings. He knows what kind of problems they have encountered. He knows like all the underground, all the dirty kind of claws they have under the bed. So the QA process was also very streamlined. You see, the isolation of work is much, much better. The team would ensure that the feature that they develop is good enough, that it's performant enough, that it's up to standard, and so they submit the feature for final QA, for final integration QA, and in majority of cases, it's good enough. It's good enough for integration, and there is no tons of random work generated anymore. Hallelujah. Brothers and sisters, 9 people. And this time, the majority are developers, which is good. So what has just happened there? By simplifying the structure, we removed 10 unnecessary communication links, and it greatly improved the cycle time of features that we developed that way. Things got much better. Planning of features developed that way got more predictable. Communication improved, and we also had less fear about, like, what do we do? How do we change the team? Will that new approach work, or will that new approach won't work? So now we had a proof in reality that this approach could work. So what we've done after that is we decided, because the situation was extremely critical, we decided to go all in, and in just 1 week, we did the following with the team. We just took the blender, ta-da! That's what we ended up with. No more design departments, engineering departments. All teams have their dedicated person of main function in their team. Each team owns their feature. Work is very well isolated. And in majority of cases, teams have everything they need to do their part of the job. Less complexity. Productivity increased by a huge margin. when we went through this transformation, the productivity just skyrocketed. Our releases got way better. Planning became much more reliable due to way less complexity. Ownership became possible. Each feature is now owned by a team and a team lead, ideally, right? With the old approach, like what do? You pick a backlog item, divide it into needed amount of pieces of work, distribute the pieces, manage dependencies, and hope for the best. With the new approach, what do? You just pick a backlog item, give it to a team, and they will figure out how to make it work. They will drive it until completion. Leads now have time to work. Because complexity and the amount of communication decreased greatly, it actually spread tons of time for team leads. They're not spending entire days in meeting rooms and like juggling Jira tickets and writing meeting notes about who agreed on what and when and why and because. They now have time to sit down, talk to their people, and like actually do parts of work themselves. After all, they're the most experienced guys on the project, and when they get back to the roots, they can do some magic, and I like it. Learning. Because different disciplines got united, like now everybody, people who started to work with that approach could experience firsthand how everybody works. Like QA learn from engineers learn from QA, everybody understands their pipelines better, which helps in self-education, and it helps in getting stuff done more quickly, and people become better professionals, and programmers do design work. Hello. And the contribution of each individual person to the final result improved tremendously. And morale improved. Output became very transparent. The team either delivers a feature or not. Output became much bigger. We started to release rich updates, and people can now clearly understand what they're working on and how their work impacts the game. They're not working on closing Jira tasks anymore. They're working on shaping up pieces of the game. And players loved the increase in productivity and increase in quality. And there was a lot of praise. And teams were happy that players were happy. And that increased motivation. A few words on motivation. Motivation is always a very hot topic. And it's always a huge question, how do you motivate people, right? What do? Do you come over, do you grab them, shake them, and yell at them, please be motivated, I need you to work harder? That could work 1 or 2 times, but after that, it doesn't. Surprisingly, the change in the structure and in the approach to how we started to work is very well described in a highly recommended book by Daniel Pink Grieve. We, game developers, are in a very interesting position, right? Our work is highly creative. And it's highly creative not because we develop games with tanks and ships and elves and orcs in them. No, not because of this. Our work is highly creative because we're solving issues no one ever solved before on daily basis. Even if you work on, on cloning a game, you are most likely to encounter a completely different set of problems the original team had, because maybe you're using a different tech stack. Maybe you've got a different team. You've got different cultural backgrounds in your team compared to the original team. You actually have no idea either you are improving on stuff that works in the original or not, because you don't have the data. And this is why our job is highly creative. We're solving unique issues on a daily basis. And Pink's research shows that there are three main things that affect motivation of people who do creative jobs: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And feature teams are exactly the environment that nurture those things. Teams are autonomous as they're working on a relatively isolated piece of the game. There are not too many people of the same function representing in one team, so all disciplines within the team are autonomous as well. If there is a need for programming work, there is a specific programmer the entire team relies on. Mastery. There is less specialization in teams, so one team member may be required to do more things, and you learn faster if you do more things and more complex things. Teams that are not resolving tasks, they're like shaping up game features, which is also very important, which is way more complex than resolving tasks. And this is also complements to the learning process a lot. And purpose. You're responsible for the entire solution. Without you, the team is not going to deliver. Without your team, the project is not going to improve because it will not get the functionality you're working on. And it was contagious. Feature teams were organically organized across the studio. People wanted to get close to each other, to people who affect their work, ideally in the same room, or if that was not possible, at least on the same floor. They didn't need a structural change for that. They just wanted to work together. This got beyond development, and such departments like HR started to create their own strike teams while working on complex projects. It may sound like we've solved every single issue, and this is like the perfect way of working on stuff. No, it's not. I believe each case is different, and every studio is different. But if you ask me a question, are we happy with the change? I say yes, we're happy with the change. Are we satisfied completely? No, we're not satisfied completely, because there are always ways we could improve. And I would also like to talk a little bit about the major issues that we're having with this approach as of now. Difficult to keep the vision, both creative and technical. As features are now developed faster and the preparation time period is much shorter, sometimes it's difficult to make sure that everybody on the big team aware of all the changes that are coming. Also, as teams got more independent and got more freedom, there is now way less control on how every single individual does their work. There are sometimes desyncs between teams, both in technology and in design. Though sometimes it causes conflicts, I would choose this over slower development big time. And there is definitely a lot of room for improvement that we can do there. Some disciplines are hard to implement the feature teams concept. For example, if we're talking about massive content production, right, like 3D art, it doesn't really make sense to unite these professionals into feature teams, and this could implement some sort of conflict because some people work with newer, more shiny, and better methodologies, and some people are working always and I need to say kudos to our art guys because they figure out how to create their own feature kind of structure, which is very, very awesome. Difficult to scale. When we've been thinking about this approach, we were like, yes, it makes absolute sense, and it will be so much easier to scale because, like, look, you've got a new area showed up that needs attention. What do? You just build a team and let them cover this area. In reality, it was not that easy because we really want to have very experienced people and people who really understand the product and people who really like self-driving people because they have freedom and they have this authority to make decisions. And that means that in order to create a new team, you need a very solid core to build that team. So now actually hiring became much more difficult. Now when we need a new engineer and we hire one, he needs to go through a very lengthy kind of training before he is actually contributing to the team and could be let go and do like autonomous stuff for teams. Could be hard to implement mostly in terms of titles. In majority of cases, when you're thinking about switching from a departmental based structure to a teams-based structure, that means that you're demoting some of the people. Some people will stop becoming managers and they will become team leads. For some, this is important. And when we've been going through this transformation, we had to let several people go because they didn't believe in the change and they didn't believe that it was important and that it will work. But on the other hand, if you've got somebody on your team who cares more about their title than the well-being of the project, maybe that's not such a big deal and they should be let go. There are still some silos. This time team silos, not department silos. After about 1 year, after we went through this transformation, we saw the return of silos. This is human. I think after seeing this, I believe this is human. When things calm down, people want to hide. People want everybody to leave them alone and don't bother them and leave them alone in their little and cozy silo. But this is not how teams should work. We've been discussing, I know that there is a lot of pain currently with this silos being brought back. And we talked a lot about how we're going to change that thing in the future. And once I recover, I'm sick and weak and tired. Once I recover and get back to the office next week, we'll continue this thing and we'll overcome the challenges that we have right now. Yeah. So, summing up, I believe this is time to sum up what we've been talking about in this presentation and identify some takeaways that I hope could help you in situations where you need to ramp up with people maybe, or when you're having issues with community delivery and communication. So before hiring, make sure your structure is ready. Bringing more people on board is always a good thing, as you'll have more people to deliver a result. But it's very dangerous, as it could completely cripple your organization, as it has almost happened to us. Look at your structure, try to understand, try to map the ideal flow of how you want the information to travel through your organization. And if the structure is not ready for the ramp up, you better not ramp up. It will cause more problems. Engagement is way more important than process. First thing is making sure that people like what they do, that they enjoy their work. If they're not enjoying their work, if they're not enjoying coming to work every day, no process would help. So the first idea for everybody who is working on the team is to make sure that people issues are solved. And happy people will establish the best processes by themselves. The performance of a system is not the sum of its parts. is the product of its interactions. Players only see value that we deliver. And no process, it may sound like I hate process. I don't. I really like process. Process is important. But no process will help to deliver more value. What delivers value is when there is a game designer and an engineer sitting in the same room. And designer is doing some terrible routine every day. And engineer walks by every day and he sees the designer doing some crazy things. And he comes over and he says, wait a minute, why are you doing this? I could write a script for you and we'll get this all done in 15 minutes. And it won't need to spend hours every day. That's the interaction that creates value. This is what kind of interaction you want to have in your teams. And this is how the productivity increases on the large scale. And if you figure out how to let people influence the result, they always surprise me. People, and you guys, you always surprise me how much you can do and when you're being trusted in delivering the result. Action stations. Thank you.
Let's thank Daniel. Daniel, that was very amazing presentation. Thank you so much. Guys, we have around 6 or 7 minutes for questions. You can stand in the line in front of this microphone, and also me and another moderator will come to you with our microphones. So speak Russian, English, no matter.
Я попрошу сразу прощения у англоязычных коллег за то, что задаю вопрос по-русски. Я заметил, что в юнитах не нарисованы UI-специалисты, или UX назвать. Они выделены в отдельную команду. Почему так устоялось?
Как и много... sorry. The question was why units do not have their UI people in place. Why all UI folks are united in one team. So because we started this transformation with the UI team, and it was the first team that got united into one big unit and actually proved that it could deliver big things fast. Just we transformed the rest of the organization similar to this, and we actually haven't made the second step in switching to truly completely cross-functional divisions. And perhaps this is one of the next steps that we might do in the nearest future. That was the question spot on. This was just when we were talking about the dependencies, this was one of the dependencies that we had. And now we're actually thinking how to improve on this.
Спасибо. Правильно ли я понимаю, что выделяя отдельно программистов в команды, должен все равно сохраняться какой-то, каким образом они синхронизируют свою экспертизу, что они не пишут, не создают велосипедов, не пишут одно и то же. Есть ли какая-то специальная, может, команда, которая занимается этим?
So the question is, when different disciplined people in different teams, because they have the freedom of making stuff they want to make, how do you avoid situations of work duplications or architectural mismatches and stuff like that? So for these kind of things, we've got one guy who is basically, you can say he's the tech director of game logic, for example. And basically he would review in majority of cases, he would just trust other people that they would do a good enough work. But with something very complex, when the feature is very big or very complex and touches a lot of different things, he would review it, he would give feedback, and the team would adapt and correct the code. Also, when people start to work on something big, it is also a lot of communication between the team and that guy on how they should proceed, how like the architecture should look like and stuff like that.
Thank you.
We also have short sync-ups between programmers each week. Каждую неделю у нас есть еще небольшой синк между программерами. Собираемся перед обедом.
Yeah, another thing is that every different disciplines have different like sync-ups during different timetables. For example, QA guys, they sync up twice a day, every day, with status updates and all that kind of stuff. And on the other hand, the game logic engineers, they sync up once a week to share the progress, to talk about stuff, what issues they're encountering, what kind of work they're working on, and stuff like that.
Вопрос по размеру команд и по количеству команд. Человек существо ограничено, и от 3 до 7 элементов это его предел обычно. Если делать команды большими, то получается мешанина. Если делать много команд, то ими очень сложно управлять.
The question is that the ability of human brain to process figures more than 7 is very limited. And basically when you're creating bigger teams, that means that there are issues within that team. And when you're creating too many small teams, that means that there are too many teams and a mess in the bigger organization. I can only say that you're perfectly correct. This is true. But I believe we're trying to keep our teams down to, I think the biggest team that we have is what, 10 people? I think. Yeah, something like that. Misha, did I answer your question? Okay.
Вы говорите о таком подходе на примере уже готового и развивающегося проекта. Будет ли работать такой проект, если писать игру с нуля? И вопрос, стоит ли пытаться адаптировать этот подход для меньших команд, ну то есть для небольших, 50-70 человек хотя бы?
The question is, the example in this presentation was on the project that is already running, and the example was based on the transformation. If we're talking about the new project starting up, is it viable to think of that approach when you're only starting to build a new team, a smaller team, maybe 20, 30 people? I would say absolutely yes. If you look at the latest researches and the latest trends in group dynamics, in teams' behaviors, you'll see that such companies as Tesla, such companies as NASA, such companies as SpaceX, they're all transferring from departments to teams because this is a way more efficient way of delivering result. There is a bigger demand on the quality of people because you really want to have best people to be on your team. You don't want to have mediocre people. So the demand on people is much bigger compared to departments. But if we're talking about efficiency, the current industry, and not only game development industry, shows that this is the most efficient way of delivering projects with high level of uncertainty. And there is a guy, Keith Fuller, right here, the one in the glasses. He is an expert on these things. You could talk to him about this.
Guys, I have to remind you that we have to get ready to the next presentation, so let's make it last question, and you can reach out Danny and ask all other questions personally right after his talk, okay?
Okay, my question is, how do you hire people since you have such big team? And I know you can test their ability, but how do you hire the person that will click with your team?
The question about hiring, how do we hire people that fit to the team? There are two ways of answering this question, an easy one and a difficult one. The easy one, our general manager has forbidden us to hire more people. That's an easy way of answering this. The other question is very philosophical, and it goes to the question of culture, to the culture of the organization, and such thing which is called cultural fit. So basically, you want to hire only those people who fit the culture of your organization.
Do you have a shortcut for your organization?
Shortcut?
Yeah, like a special question.
Yes, we don't hire people. This is the shortcut. You actually don't want to take shortcuts here.
Okay, let's thank again Daniel for his very interesting presentation and you all for listening to him.
Thank you.